All right, thank you. Super excited to be here with a friend and colleague in Ash. We are super excited because this is actually the moment that we're launching the company Productiv yesterday. And so really excited to share a lot of stuff that's going on. But before I get into that, a little bit just about each one of us. So as mentioned, most recently I was at Google for about 9 years. I used to run the Google Analytics enterprise business and led Google Analytics overall. It was approximately, I should be careful, a few hundred people working on that product, and anywhere else it would be a freestanding public company. So really a lot of interesting things there. Before that, always been doing technical products, engineering and product management, leadership positions at a number of different companies, and pretty passionate about data kinds of problems, really hard technical problems, and that's been to date, and then really is some of the impetus for why we got involved with deciding to do the current company, Productiv.
And hi, I'm Aashish Chandarana. I've been working in media all my career, very close to technology, but focus very much now on the partners that we have both across our digital businesses and our enterprise within technology at Fox. I've been working with Jody while they've been under the radar.
In stealth for quite some time,
yeah.
So here we are. We'll go through a few things today. First is just the state of SaaS. How did we get to where we are today? It's been a lot of changes in recent years. This new SaaS research, everyone's got copies as well that you can take home with you, but to talk through some of the interesting findings that were there. We'll learn quite a bit in terms of what's happened for Fox, and share a little bit about a new analytics solution, the Productiv platform, give you kind of a sneak peek of what that's all about. So with that said, let's just jump into it. If we go back and think about sort of how did we get here? Go back 20 years ago, what was software? It was still shrink-wrap software. It was still version software, might get updated every couple of years. It was a simpler world. And then Salesforce came along, really the pioneer 20 years ago now, it's kind of hard to think about, as software as a service, software in the cloud. And it was pretty interestingly disruptive in many ways, right? So we didn't have compact discs being shipped around or big downloads that were occurring. In a world now where software is being updated pretty regularly, the pricing changed, the software delivery mechanisms changed, the ways that we used it all changed. Many good things happening here. But at the same time, really what changed for IT, a lot of good innovations here, but it wasn't radically disruptive. So many of the benefits and many more companies coming on the market doing this in those years since. To where are we today, where we have a phenomenal number of applications available to us, literally tens of thousands of applications, many more logos than even just here, as we know. For every particular category, for every particular function, so many applications available. And what's the interesting challenge is that we have actually moved from a world where historically we might have had 10 applications, 20 applications, to worlds where we have hundreds of applications in use. And this has actually become really a fascinating challenge. I'm sure many folks in the audience would agree just in terms of your own experiences here. It was a simpler world when we only had 10 applications. If you went to a CIO 10 years ago and said, what software do we use in the organization? It would be a pretty straightforward conversation. This is vendor number 1, number 2, number 3. I know exactly what I purchased. I know what I paid for it. I know how long that deal is for. I know the exact version of the software that I purchased. All those systems, all those ways of doing things have changed pretty radically now that we're in these worlds of having so many applications out there. And particularly if in an enterprise, this winds up being an incredibly large challenge. Right? These are organizations with tens of thousands of employees. Really, what does that mean? What all these different people are buying? What are they using? How does all this work? And the other really big change that's occurred here is that the business units have a real say in things. So it's no longer a world where the centralized IT team is deciding, I'm going to go out, I'm going to evaluate what vendors are there, I'm going to wind up picking the set that we're going to have, I'm going to procure it, I'm going to purchase it, I'm going to deploy it, I'm going to operate it. Yes, those things are still at play, but all of the SaaS vendors have now gone directly into the business units and are offering so many more choices. Could be to the design team, to the marketing team, to the sales teams, where they are now not just recipients of the software, but they actually in a very good way are true stakeholders in this scenario. So really picking what is a good tool for us. I have many choices, and this has now shifted very much so to being a collaboration between the business unit and the centralized IT function, keeping in mind there's so much opportunity for the two of them to work together. So the paradigm has shifted, in some ways disruptive, but in many ways actually creating tremendous opportunity for the business as a whole. I'm sure, Ash, you've seen some of the similar things.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think your point about where these products are now being sold is really key to this, actually, because gone are the days where you go and sit in front of the CIO or a CTO as it is nowadays, and like SurveyMonkey, probably in most of the businesses I've worked, was introduced by someone that had signed up on a credit card without any involvement from anyone in technology. That's not to say it's a bad thing, it's a great platform, but actually these are the challenges that we're getting, this complete proliferation of apps.
Absolutely. So the other key change here, and again, Ash, you've seen this firsthand, is this element that the enterprise has gone SaaS. Okta, our friends hosting this wonderful event, just came out with some recent research that just in their own customer base, and they're segmenting here by large companies and small companies. Large companies in the yellow-orange, 2,000 or more employees. The average enterprise in 2018 has 129 Okta integrated applications, which means there's even more applications that play in the organization. But even 129 is that's a pretty good set of applications. That's a not small number.
I wish we had 120. I think the reality for us, and it's been a really interesting time for folks. We've just come out of a transaction where the previous incarnation of the company, we merged a significant portion of that into Disney in the last few weeks, which completed. But as part of that, we've really seen the overall size of our estate, actually. And it's unique in the sense that you don't normally get that opportunity to sit down and really take a look at what you do have. Also rationalize what do you need and where do you want to end up going forward. I think it kind of touches a bit on what I said before. The 129 is an interesting number. It's the 129 that you know about. I think there's also the unknowns within all of that. But I think the broader thing with the 129 is they all may be providing value, but understanding how they're providing value in the organization is getting more and more challenging in each area. Even if they are deployed and managed and procured in the ways that you kind of want, I think that's the real issue that we're finding. Everybody's got an inconsistent approach from a vendor or partner perspective in what they're sharing with us and how they're sharing with us and how they're pricing it. So actually understanding the real impact on the business is the true challenge.
Absolutely. And it's something we've seen certainly in our working relationship, but also many of the other CIOs that we work with, is just saying we have so many of these applications. It's actually a good thing again, right? We want to be deliberate about this. We like the fact that there's so much more choice out there. But the enterprise has gone SaaS, and it's changing. Again, we can see just in Okta's own data, changing pretty rapidly and pretty significantly. I've yet to hear one CIO say, "Oh, we're moving from X to a much smaller number." Maybe in some cases where there's very clear deduplication happening.
Yeah, I think just going back to the exercise we've been through, we're definitely starting to consolidate around platforms that these applications operate on. I think Force.com's a great example of those kind of smaller hundreds of apps that you may have had before, kind of now all sit on one common platform or core that we can then go off and do things around. But no, I think it's a very fair point. The new thing comes along and everybody wants it now and deployed and up there.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So this kind of ties into this exact question, which is there's so much investment in SaaS, and as these organizations are moving more and more rapidly, more and more heavily into SaaS, so the first order question is just what is our investment? So there's a certain set of things, again, historically that we can all easily see. I know I have a Microsoft contract. I have a sense of how big that is. I know what we're doing with them. I might have, again, some other large vendors. But really, what is the full set of applications we have, all the things we're spending money on, and asking sort of the further questions about, what do I have in terms of just what is the set of applications? What am I spending? What are all the things that might not be obvious that I'm spending? But there's such an inability consistently to understand just what is actually our investment in SaaS, because it's important and it's a growing percentage of where we spend time operationally, where we spend dollars, where we spend energies acquiring, renewing, et cetera, the whole strategy.
I think this is a key area and one that's becoming more and more challenging for companies as we broaden the application estate, right? So there's no one consistent model. I think if we go back to that 20 years ago and SaaS and it was going to deliver so much and we all talked about utility, so I'm only going to pay for what I used. I think in reality we all know that actually hasn't happened in most areas. So typically what happens is you go in to buy something, you're asked to project for the next 3 years what you're going to use, you kind of commit to it, you get 2.5 years down that life cycle, you kind of think, oh God, we've got to renew this. Oh no, we weren't using as much. In the end, you've run out of time, so you can't really replace it or rip it out, so you do another deal, but you kind of end up in that perpetual thing where, okay, well, they've thrown in a bunch of extra stuff now, but then you go back into that cycle again. Is that extra stuff being used? Who's using it? Why are we using it? What's the benefit it's really deriving? So I think that's one element of it from the investment side. I think the other piece that really gets overlooked, and I think you're probably going to touch on this in a bit, is investment isn't the only lens on these things. Sure, it's a really important one because no one, I'm sure, sitting here with a CFO saying, have a blank checkbook, go and buy what you want. But you've got to look at these from multiple different multiple facets. But we've never had that opportunity to overlay that kind of information and data, and I think what you guys are talking about is really taking us in that direction.
Absolutely. And so this next question, beyond just do I understand the investment side, is the return side, right? The CFO question is not just don't spend money. It's spend money smartly.
Yeah.
Be capital efficient. Let's make sure that we're getting the return out of it. And historically, this is so hard to do because, again, why are we investing all these energies? Why are we investing all this money, purchasing all the software? There's a larger goal at play here, which says we should be expecting a return from all of our investments. We should be getting all those exciting things that we talked about with the vendor. We're going to be able to collaborate more easily. We're going to be able to do any number of things more effectively, more efficiently as a large organization. You come back around, and what we see later is, I know what I spent because I can see those invoices going out. It's really hard to answer this return question.
No, I think that's the real thing for us. So we, at our company, we're not, I wouldn't say we're fans of shadow IT, but we kind of respect it. And we think if it kind of needs to exist, it means we're missing something or we haven't quite got something right. So I think when we deployed Slack to every employee in the company just over 2 years ago. And when we looked at it, I think we had about 25% of the people that we thought, 25% of the overall kind of population were already using it in their jobs, albeit through a free model or through the paid or on someone's credit card or someone had done an enterprise deal here. We made the decision to kind of roll it out beyond that because collaboration only really exists if everybody's got access to the platform, right? You can't have it in a microcosm in the corner. But the first question we got asked was not about how much did we spend on it. It was just like, but how many people are using it? What's the impact on my business? And that's a CEO, COO kind of question. It's not only to the CIO and CTO that those questions are being posed, but has this improved sales productivity? Has this improved how we're responding to customers? All those kinds of things. And I think when you start to see those two sides to every conversation, it gives you a very, very different answer.
Absolutely. Because these are, to your point, these are C-level investments,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're making the investment.
100%.
Let's make sure that, the multi-year return is there as well.
Yeah.
Right. So some interesting research. Pulse Q&A went out and surveyed over 100 IT executives. These are 5,000 or more employee companies. So really, we think about it as, we talked about as SaaS is sort of penetrating the enterprises are moving SaaS. This is a pretty good set of IT executives answering pretty candidly, what are some of the challenges, what are they seeing, how are they thinking about it? And I thought it's pretty interesting. I think you'll find it interesting as well. First area was just around, okay, so this move to SaaS is happening. 55% of executives believing we're going to be on SaaS by the end of 2020. Excuse me, the majority of the applications on SaaS by the end of 2020. And that's just the proof point. If we go back to what that Okta slide was, we can kind of almost predict what the next few rows are going to be for coming years. And this is, I think, pretty powerful and interesting and good thing, which says that as these organizations are making these decisions, SaaS is a good thing, there's all these benefits, they're starting to move pretty heavily in those directions to a point where we will be a SaaS-heavy or SaaS-only organization in a relatively short period of time. This is just 7 quarters away from now. It's not in the indefinite future.
No, and I think the thing that scares me is the kind of the 42% at the moment, actually, probably a bit more. But it's an interesting journey to go on. I think if you take each application in isolation as a business case almost, it's never going to stand up as the way to do things, because you kind of got to retool your entire enterprise to operate in a different way. I think once you make that leap, though, I think you see all the non-tangible returns other than the finance piece that we talked about. I think from our perspective, we were definitely in the 50 to 75% category prior to the close of this deal, and we intend to be in that 4% category now within 12 months, where literally everything will be a SaaS-based platform. That's definitely on our enterprise side. We still have some legacy stuff that we deal with on the broadcast side, but we kind of track that separately.
It's pretty impressive in terms of just speed of historical moving and then really picking it up another notch going forward.
We saw this as a real opportunity to retool our enterprise. So for a significant portion of what we're trying to do, we've gone with zero legacy, a complete greenfield on how we launch it. So we're putting in a brand new financial system. We're partnering with our colleagues in finance. And we're not taking kind of legacy workflows and things. We're building it from the ground up on how you would build a modern company. I think coupled with the strategy that we already had in place, which I think is very neatly displayed on the billboards across the street. A few of my colleagues are worried about where they took the idea from. But I think that puts us in a really healthy position. I think that the ultimate thing for us is we're not creating technology for technology's sake. I think people talk about the consumerization of the enterprise. It's not just consumerization from the point of view of how people use things, but we care about it we want to track the way our employees and our colleagues work in the same way that we track our customers. We look at daily active usage. Is this platform deriving value? Is it making your job easier? Is it actually, ultimately, what we really care about is the content that our fantastic creative partners are making every day, getting to the customers that want to consume it. And actually, everything that we do has got to have an impact on that. We're not a tech company. We're a creative business at heart, and we intend to be for a long time. Everything we do wants to really drive that ambition. So what can we do to get there?
Absolutely. And this kind of gets to the point, the shadow IT question you mentioned a moment ago. Again, whole bunch of IT executives. This is an uncomfortable question to be asked, right? Do you actually have confidence in the set of applications being used in the company? But nobody wants to be in the position of saying, well, not really, right? Because the immediate next question is, how can you not be, right? Who's running things? And yet, sort of pretty candidly admitting, we know there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about. That sort of question on itself is uncomfortable. The next question is is that okay? No. So we need to be it is fairly widely recognized as a CIO, as an IT executive. We may be in a world where there's all these, shadow ITs come into the organization. I've had business units buying different things on their own. Going forward, the world cannot be one of complete decentralization, fragmentation. We're not going to be in a world where you can just make an end run around IT. You have to work with IT. There will be a state of things being managed.
Yeah, I think you nailed that one.
Yeah, right. If you disagreed, I would be worried.
Yeah, that would be fine.
And so the next question is, so how are you doing this today? What are the systems in play? And sort of not great reality, I would expect fairly familiar to a number of folks here as well, is sort of isn't really a great system, right? It's manual, it's spreadsheets, it's, where's the Dropbox contract? Oh, it's in somebody's email. Oh, not that person's email. They had the previous draft of it, right? There's no place that all this stuff there's no place that all this lives. It's just all manual systems. And again, we know these are not perfect systems of doing it, but they fall over worse and worse as we go from 20 applications to 30 to 50 to 100 and beyond. And so there has to be a better solution here as the complexity of the organization is increasing?
This was a really important thing for us. I think we were quite early on the software as a service curve, and I think in the early days, as you kind of had very big deployments of SaaS applications, it was relatively straightforward to kind of manage. But as you've seen this proliferation, I think the other thing is where I think it's great if you've got one team managing everything. And we kind of, we have a lot more of a kind of collaborative federated model, especially where you have international businesses. So you've got in territory, in region, but you kind of got these big corporate deals done to try and kind of gather demand. But then you've got someone over here buying licenses that doesn't know that we've got licenses over here. And you kind of end up with these huge pockets and problems, which when you come to kind of do these deals again, it's like the size of the relationship's going down, so those partners tend to be less interested in driving the conversation forward. The other point here is actually understanding from a security standpoint what we have got and what we have got deployed.
Absolutely.
Not that this is your kind of foremost tool for that, but there were bits of this living in sort of, ServiceNow, there were bits of it living in your CMDB, there are bits of it in people's email, there are bits of it, I think Okta is a great example of that knits it together, but is that the real layer that you should be using to try and identify what you've got? It's probably not.
And this is, I think, it sort of naturally tees up to this next question, which is what does it even mean when we say managing SaaS applications? So kind of breaking it down, saying 61% of people are saying, yeah, I feel like I have a decent sense of all the licenses that I've purchased, right? I can, one way or another, I can get back to what have we bought. Really being able to understand application discovery, only 41% saying, I feel like we have a reasonable handle on that. And then there's a whole bunch of additional things which we think are pretty valuable in terms of not just have I bought the right software and have I purchased the right number of licenses and am I using them, but really getting much, much deeper into understanding application engagement. All the contracts that I have, are they right-sized? Do they make sense for how actually we're going to wind up using? Am I able to connect pieces of this back to the value, the actual employee productivity, the whole purpose for which we purchase the software? The numbers are pretty low. Even more so when you dial it down further to say, do you have real-time data on this? In many cases, in my conversations, and I think in a similar sense for some of the exercises you guys were doing before, it's incredibly manual, incredibly painful. So it's not a question of I can ask at any given moment, what do we have for a particular vendor? Where are we on that contract usage? How is it being utilized?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say before we started working with you, I think the key for us was the engagement and productivity piece. These were highly strategic decisions, not just built around tech for tech's sake or modernization. We really wanted to unlock productivity and engagement and modernize the workplace. I think we were trying to track daily active usage, and I think there's a modern set of partners that you showed on your first slide that will definitely give you that kind of metric and that kind of numbers. Some are getting into real time. Others were very much, it's not even available on our console. We have to manually crunch it. But we ended up having, I think, sort of 2 warm bodies working on this, and we'd deliver a monthly report 10 days into the month for the previous month. And it wasn't really indicative of where it's going or trying to understand patterns of why behavior exists or where you might need to do something better or differently. So I think that's great. I think and it scares me that there are still partners out there that claim that, their software as a service. I was in a room with someone the other day, and I said, look, when do we get to the point where we can get daily usage numbers? And they said, well, we have access to that internally. I was like, well, I'm the customer that's paying here. Is there any chance we could have access to it, So I think those 2 categories are really important. I think all the other areas fall naturally into everything after that. But if you really do care about treating your employees or your colleagues as customers and giving them the best chance to succeed, I think you've got to focus on those 2 areas.
Yeah, that's good. The other question was posed of there's all these applications that are being used in the organization. As we think about some of the most expensive applications and do we feel like we've got them right-sized, some pretty consistent patterns came back of, yeah, I feel like I don't have enough information to have a productive conversation with that vendor about what have we bought and are we getting everything we'd hoped from it, and both in the context of have I bought too much or have I bought too little, but also are we even using as much as we'd hoped to, and what can we do about that? I know you guys have had some thoughts here.
Well, I think this is the kind of key for us. I think some of these, they're very different. So I was just looking at the partners. I've worked with all of those partners on there in varying sort of points in the last 5 years. I think it's a real issue. I think especially when you're committing up front to 3 years. But there are some of these which it kind of makes sense where if you're looking into Salesforce, there's a lot of product lines in that. And you're licensed in some areas around certain bits of your business, which makes sense. And that business strategy might change and you may need to right size. And I think they're generally been a very, very strong partner of ours. I think the ones that really fall foul in this list, without kind of naming names, is where, look, I know exactly how many employees I've got. Why am I paying for 1.5 times the number of employees? Or why have I got 20% of that and 50% of that? And, you know, it's no transparency on this. And I think everything's sort of, I think we need to take a step back in some of these areas. Everything's designed around a SKU and an internal metric that a sales team's got to hit. And I think if you were starting to be a bit more customer focused actually, which is what I would hope, because that's what I want to be for the platforms we're buying and deploying. I think we'd like to see a real shift in that area. And hopefully this kind of, you know, one of our tenets internally is being transparent to all our partners and to be that our colleagues in finance or legal or our creative partners or the employees in what we do and how we deploy. And I think it's only reasonable to expect that back.
Absolutely.
From our partners, to be fair.
So you've touched on some elements here, but I thought maybe it'd just be helpful to give a bigger picture of.
Yeah. I think it's been an interesting sort of 24 months, sort of nearly 30 months since we took a bit of a step change at Fox. I think enabling collaboration was a really key thing for our executive team. 21st Century Fox, as it was then, was around about 55 to 60,000 people all around the world. Largely born, the company was born largely out of significant acquisitions. You know, Rupert Murdoch launched it with one newspaper sort of 50, 60 years ago to build out effectively what became two companies in News Corp and Fox, with a significant number of brands and propositions. When you look into those businesses, and they were deliberately kind of built that way because they were acquired and left to run themselves, there's an awful lot of things that were common. There was, you know, be that the way that we produce content in certain areas, be that the way that we sell, be that the way we manage our distribution or our partners. And I think it was really unlocking that value at the ground level. I think collaboration's a great word. We're all going to work together, and that's great when you're sitting around an executive table. Kind of getting it happening on the ground is a real challenge. So for us, enabling collaboration was definitely a significant piece. I think the platforms that we had in place probably prevented that, or the way they were deployed definitely prevented it. So that's definitely been a key thing for us. I think that's where you start to see, I think Slack's been a huge, huge opportunity for us. But again, it's not just about deploying these things. It's about making sure people are using them, that we've got the use cases that really drive the business forward and make sure that people, you know, it's one thing to be able to use Slack for chat. It would be great if I could request my leave or approve work data, whatever it might be within that, to really get to where I need to get to. I think the other things on here are kind of important to us, but they're definitely not the primary drivers. I think the collaboration piece was key. I think we underestimated how much of a disservice we definitely did to our production colleagues and our creative partners, actually, where effectively the same tool set you've had for 25 plus years wasn't really cutting the mustard. Just the thought of putting Slack into a live sports scenario, right? And I think we ran the significant portion of our output throughout the day on Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2 last year during the FIFA World Cup was the production teams on Slack between Moscow and LA. And we were producing remotely. You know, our talent was out in Moscow. We had a core operation out there at the International Broadcast Center. But the real production was happening in LA with remote production. But that real-time capability was unbelievable. So that's been a real key story for us. I think the challenges are, how do you get people off the old stuff? You know, you've still got a subset of colleagues who don't live that kind of life, who are sitting primarily in an office at the same desk every day, doing a variety of things, but making sure that they have what they need to drive that forward. I think wrapped around this is obviously the whole security layer that is mission critical for a company like ours. I won't go into any details, but there's a lot of people interested in what we're producing, how we produce it, and I think the very impact of losing some of that stuff ahead of schedule has material impact on the value of the company and the way your shareholders and investors perceive you. So that's kind of been the key driver around this, simplifying it, making it really fit for purpose, modern, and really enabling our colleagues to go out and be what they need to be to achieve what we want as a company.
And to your point, this very deliberate strategy
Yeah.
of which tools we want to use, and it's not being decided on a per tool basis. It's almost being decided in a portfolio basis of.
Yeah, it is. So we do believe in a best-in-class strategy. We're not frightened to say to certain partners, look, we think you're weak in this area. We're going to go in a different direction. That doesn't mean you lose the other business or what it might be, but we do have this best-in-class approach where we think we know who sits in which kind of box for us. Yeah. We think there are multiple opportunities in each of those, which keeps competition healthy, and price kind of is a metric for us. But we like to go deep with partners, especially with partners who've specialized in certain areas. I think some of the bigger players are really, really good at some things, but not so good at other things. And I think getting them to understand that and play really nicely. I think one of the things we're now talking about a lot more when we go to market to talk, and we're doing this at the moment, is being very clear that this is how we view the world, and we're more than happy to work with you in this, but you've got to respect that this is our strategy and this is what we're going to do. You can't come into the room and say, well, if you bought my product, it would have worked better, kind of thing. It's just that's how we kind of see the ecosystem.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And so we have been working together quite a bit, tackling a bunch of elements of this larger strategy. I mentioned earlier that before doing this, I was at Google. I was running Google Analytics and had built its enterprise business. And the sort of key observation that I had was around application engagement data, really being something that was missing and that was interesting and very, very powerful in business context. And in a marketing context, Google Analytics is the platform of choice. It is what is used by every marketer, every CMO to understand the entire customer journey, from first interaction with your customer all the way through the process of them becoming a customer and then the ongoing interaction and engagement with them. And that has radically transformed the field of marketing in recent years as there's been so much data available. The modern CMO is very much a data-driven marketer and is incredibly powerful and efficient in their role because of the role that data plays. And in an IT context, the observation of this isn't there, it should be there, initially kind of looking at saying, why isn't it there? But we believe that Productiv is actually going to be this exact same solution, the platform by which you understand how all of the employees in an organization are engaging with all the applications. How are people getting their work done? The entire employee journey, if we will, as an analogy of the customer journey, has to be understood. And it's a complex journey because it's going to span multiple tools. It's going to span multiple groups of people. But the whole way that work is being done is on all these massive investments in software that we have made. Let's make sure we get the return side out of it as well.
Yeah, it's just crazy that we treat consumers and people that work for us in a very, very different way.
Yeah.
I just think just absolutely making sure they need what they want to be effective is I mean, it's got to be the core mission of why you're putting those tools out there. So
that's right. So I thought I'd give you just a few ways that we've been thinking about it. And we've got a booth down the expo hall. Come by, we can see more of it, and we're happy to give you a demo and go deeper in conversation. But just kind of frame out how both we see it from a software platform standpoint, but really heavily influenced by many, many CIO conversations. The first need is just one of discovery. We talked about this earlier of what are all the applications I have in my organization? How do I get that in one place? We wound up doing that by bringing in a number of different data sources and joining and bringing it all together. So you've got deep connectors where we go and have a Productiv connector that connects to the individual applications. We connect with your SSO, so your Okta. connect with other systems, so bring in your financial data and expense management data to really get this whole comprehensive view of everything where I know the seven-figure contract we're spending, and on the other end of the spectrum, I want to see all the things that are going on to Amex cards and are in the organization I should at least be aware of and have an opinion on. But really, getting that one view of everything at play. The next step is really starting to drill in to ask this question. It's not just what software did I buy, and it's not just how many licenses did I buy. It's not even just like how many licenses have I provisioned, but really getting much, much deeper into understanding how is the software being used. So again, there's things that are in my contract. This is what I paid for. This is the kind of software. This is the tier of software that I bought. Here's the license mix if it's a more complicated product. But really translating that into how is it actually being used such that I can understand, one, two, go in and say, at time of an application renewal, should we renew this? Should we be doubling down even more here? Should we be adjusting things, moving things around? These are important questions, and historically there just isn't that data. And you were making reference to this earlier of having this vendor conversation of how do you have a transparent conversation where we're all operating off of the same metrics and data?
I think this is a really interesting example actually, because when you guys plugged into into all the relevant APIs, I think one of the questions we were asked was why have we got Zoom and we're also paying for something they believe they compete with, or believe they compete with Zoom, and was deployed and turned on. It was one of those things that came free with a broader suite of products. And then we looked at the numbers where we had about 80% of people who'd had Zoom and used it were using it every day or every week. I can't remember the exact metric. But and then we looked at the overall use base of the other product, which had been there for 3 years and deployed, and less than 1% of people had actually even logged in, which kind of, that was the real story for us. It's like, this is the right bet, that was the wrong bet.
Yep.
And that kind of, we should double down, absolutely we should double down on this.
That's right.
And drive it forward.
Yeah, and even these questions of asking, beyond just, is it even being used, to go deeper into how is it being used? Yep. Are we screen sharing? Are people dialing in from laptops? Is it Zoom room usage? Should we be converting more meeting rooms into Zoom rooms? Right? All these kinds of questions. Right. You want data, right? Because you'd love to go back to Zoom and say, we're all in. We're going to do even more. Have that understanding. There's other scenarios where you want to deprovision stuff. So software it's not being used at all that you're paying for, or that you're likely to tip over and wind up in a true-up conversation. Multiple license tiers. I have expensive variant and people aren't using the features in that. How do I move them to a less expensive variant? We think it's really important not just that you can understand it, but the automation piece there. So we built functionality where you can go in and do this ad hoc, to pick a particular group of users and say deprovision or downgrade them to something else, but also the ability to automate all that stuff. And again, come by, we'll show you more of what we're doing. This third piece is, and you can probably see some of my Google Analytics DNA shining through here. This is really going down to saying, we're really trying to understand what are people doing day to day? How is the software actually being used? And the very first principle of any analytics initiative or a marketing analytics initiative is segmentation, to really start drilling in there and to say, how are different teams using it? How are different locations using this? Is video conferencing being used very heavily by the New York and LA teams, but the London team is not using it as much as we thought? Why is that? To drill into, again, all sorts of different ways of things. For us, this is a data problem. This is an analytics problem. There's many ways to surface that data. There's many ways to show it and to interpret it, et cetera. But the crux of it is, I need to understand things not just at a contract level, not just at a license level. I need to understand things at an engagement and interaction level. And then the last area, this kind of touches again back onto what are the C-level conversations that we're having? Many cases, it's things that at the crux of it are how are people actually working together? So classic example, I'm sure familiar to many folks in the room, is one way or another, we wound up with Box and Dropbox, and we also get OneDrive, and we get SharePoint, and we've got some other people have Google Drive, et cetera. But it's very, very common for there to be these multiple application scenarios. And you want to ask that question, who are the people that are using different things? And how many, is it actually completely disjoint populations? Is it the same people that are in multiple tools? To really understand how is work getting done. If I were to just sort of ask, amongst the organization, hey, is anybody using tool X? Invariably, people are going to raise their hands. You could again go look at the Okta data and try to learn some stuff there, but you really need to get much, much deeper to understand, again, where's there overlap, or if there is not a lot of overlap, that means we actually have a collaboration problem. These two teams are not working together, and if part of our goal was collaboration, let's debug that, let's understand it. Relatedly is even just a geographic distribution of like, what are the set of tools that people are using in one area versus another? If we were going to ask the Zoom question, who's actually, like, which offices are meeting most predominantly with other offices? How are they meeting? All these kinds of questions, you're only going to be able to answer with very deep engagement data versus very, very high level data. And so that's really a lot of how we've been thinking about this, which is putting just all back together into a 4-piece framework, which says the first step is all about just discovering. How do I understand the larger portfolio at play? There should be no questions, no surprises. The shadow IT question should be known and managed versus unknown. The second question is just going through, I have a set of applications. As I'm coming up onto contract renewals or within the confines of an existing contract, how do I get the most value out of that contract or that renewal? Really, again, being driven by very granular data that truly informs me and helps me have a data-driven conversation with the vendor. The third area just around very, very deep engagement data to understand how are people using these tools towards the larger goal of productivity. There is a reason that we've made all the investments that we're sort of in this framework. So the green side is we've made all these investments. How do I run a tight ship there to get cost efficiency? But the larger purpose is to get the return, which is all the blue areas of things. So where is the productivity in the organization? How do we see it? How do we grow it? So it's been a tremendous opportunity working together with Fox, such a mature and fresh approach to solving these problems at scale, and really appreciate Ash you coming and sharing all the insights and a little bit behind the scenes of how you guys are making decisions.
And we're hiring, by the way, if anyone's looking to take advantage of that.
We are too. Different people though.
Yeah,
We'll trade.
There we go.
Yeah, super excited about the stuff we're doing. As I mentioned, we just launched yesterday here at Oktane. Come see us. We'd love to show you more of what we're doing, chance to meet some folks on the team, and would love to hear which parts are interesting for you, and if there's things that we're not yet doing, what those would be, and maybe we should be doing them. So thank you.